Hey Ben, brilliant to see you again.
Hi, Caroline. Nice to see you.
It's been a long time. I know that lockdown and family life and everything has meant that we haven't had a chat or a catch up for a while. So I'm really looking forward to today's episodes, and I know our listeners are in for a
Yeah.
treat. So you give us a little bit of background on what you did pre-property.
Free
Uh,
property.
Pre-property, a former life. What was it all
Um,
about?
Vaguely remember, yeah, we did a basic the corporate ladder. Did a lot around corporate sponsorship, events, marketing, conferences, all that angle. Worked a lot across different sectors. Pensions and investments was one of them, which kind of will circle back to the full circle later. Food, beverage, marketing, supply chain. So yeah, worked abroad, lived in Spain for a good number of years, which was great. Left the UK 2002 with a bag and came back with a wife to be in a lorry load of stuff back to the UK just 2009. So that was an interesting time.
Yeah.
Spent about 18 months working for a US law firm, suing banks. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Again, working a lot with pension funds. And then 2010, we started on our property expedition. Like a lot of people, went and got educated. We were living in London at the time, realised we couldn't afford to live in London. Ended up in the northeast of England, buying at the time what seemed like very cheap houses for 40, 50,000 pounds buy to let. We went all the way through to HMOs, mixed use developments, commercial to resi. We did that up until 2018, 2019. So yeah, we've been in the property game, and it is a game, I guess, isn't it? For 12 years, 12 and a half years. We sold a lot of our portfolio end of 2019 because I think we'd fallen out of love with property, letting agents, bad tenants, utility bills, council tax bills, planning. So we got out a lot of our original stock, and then accidentally fell into the strategy that we're going to talk about today.
Brilliant. All right. So, a little bit on you as a person. What was your initial motivation to get into property? Because a lot of people were like, "Yeah, I just want to make money," but what was really behind it for you?
Yeah, no, it was the income was one of the obvious attractions, but I think having worked very hard, still work hard, but for different reasons, it was the control of what you do with that time. And travel. We love to travel. So I think for us, it was to access a different lifestyle, to access more time, and more control about what we're doing with that day in, day out. So yes, money, income is. I find it difficult to believe that that's not in the top 4 or 5 motivating factors for everyone, but also it was to do something of our own, to build something of our own. And yes, family, the dynamic has changed, so we've now got a legacy to think about passing down as well.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, so you've touched on the fact that 2019 you liquidated all of the portfolio, all of it.
No, a fair chunk of it. A lot of the
Yeah.
HMOs went. They were great when you're scaling up. They really boost the income, but as we all know, what comes with HMOs are letting agents, endless phone calls, endless problems, tenancy challenges. I think one of the best ones we'd ever renovated. I think the second day someone had flooded the bathroom, and you just start to think, we didn't get into this to be babysitting. And I think, like a lot of investors, we've had our challenges with letting agents, with tradespeople, and it all just came to a head. And you lose the spark, don't you, that you went into the sector with, 8-9 years previously. We were just like, we spent a lot of time babysitting the babysitter, if that makes sense.
So it served its purpose.
Yeah.
It did what it needed to do for the time, and then comes full circle.
Yeah.
So when you liquidated that, you must have had a plan on what you were going to do with that cash, or what the next step was going to be, or did you?
I'd like to say there was a really well thought out plan. Now, obviously, we discussed it, but I think the move into specialised supported living happened with that portfolio. So we ended up selling to an investment fund.
Okay.
So this is where we first got exposure to the strategy. So we were obviously showing our properties to the investor, but also this group of people that were going to be using the properties for victims of domestic violence, actually. So, you get talking to them. What do you do? How does it work? Oh, we're actually a housing association and we do long leases. This sounds interesting. So we kind of got our first exposure to supported living when we were selling the portfolio. And then that really stepped up another level, probably 6 months later. I live down in Kent, as you know, and the house opposite us was on the market. We tried to buy it because we know it was a good investment. We went and crossed the road and spoke to the builders who were putting in an LD1 fire system, which seemed very strange for what would have been a residential property. I went onto land registry, found an investment fund had purchased the house
Okay.
for a considerable larger amount than it was on the market for, which got my interest. Again, my background, as I've explained, we was exposed to the pension and investment industry. So I picked up the phone to the investment fund, spoke to them, understood the specialised supported living model a little bit, understood their demand was huge and predominantly in the Midlands and the north of England where we'd been investing. The Housing Association knocked on the door to apologise for the mess, and a lot of the neighbours have been complaining. I think I said, come and have a cup of tea. That's what we've all been taught. Have a conversation, and just literally sat them down in the kitchen and tried to understand the business model about how they work with a care company, how they work with the local authority, and how they, as the housing association, put a long lease around the building that's essentially fully repaired and insured. So very hands off in theory. So that was our introduction to the sector, pretty much by accident.
Right. So from that little bit of a taste of knowledge, what was your next step from there?
Sure. Follow the money. So the first step was to go into London to meet with a number of the investment funds that are predominantly purchasing the properties and work it backwards. So we're working out what they pay, why they pay it, what components are needed, which housing associations, or RPs as they're called, regulated providers, which RPs are the good ones. It's no different to having a commercial tenant. So people get very excited about, oh, they're going to give me a 25-year lease. Yeah, but if they've not been operating for more than 18 months, is it really worth it? And the answer normally is no. So the key is to find the strong covenants, the good leases that the investment funds would buy. So then we went and spoke to the housing associations. Then we spoke to the care companies, because the people that live in our houses are, individuals with learning disabilities, mental health problems, maybe a diagnosis of autism. So they need ongoing support. So I think we need to be very clear on what we are doing and what we're not doing. Because as always, the press has picked up on the bad part of it, but there's a lot of good to be done in the sector. So we spent a lot of time learning the jigsaw, and the sector is a jigsaw. So I think it's your exit, which could be an investment fund, it could be a refinance, your housing association partner, the good ones, the bad ones, the strong covenants. Then it's the care partners. We need to understand their challenges, the staff that are needed to give these individuals 24/7 support. And then there's probably the most complex element, which is the local authority and the NHS element. So we are taking people directly we've all seen the stories in the press. There's people being locked in a hospital ward that don't need to be there. There's a lack of provision. Probably about 50% of the individuals trying to leave hospital can't leave hospital because there's no suitable accommodation for them. So we learn how to talk to commissioning teams within local authorities. We learn how to talk to care providers, because as a property person, all you want to talk about is the bricks and mortar. It comes last. It really comes last. I think there was a huge amount of education, mistakes, new acronyms, new terminology that we had to pick up. And as I said, one day you're talking to an investment fund
Yeah.
The next day, you're talking to a social worker. The following day, you're talking to a local authority commissioner with an NHS connection. No 2 days are the same. And, that's what we're trying to piece together, is this specialised supported living scheme, if you like, and then put the property in play to make sure it meets all of those requirements. So a lot of plates, there's a lot of juggling. My head hurts from explaining it.
Just to clarify, you couldn't be bothered with letting agents and tenants. So what you did was you just got like 17 different bodies and tried to pull them all together.
And we laugh about it now, but the payoff is that the front end work is pretty intensive. But the goal, if you remember why we sold up and why we were losing the motivation, was to get that time back.
Yeah.
What we've actually built are leases which are maybe 10 to 15 years in length.
Yeah.
Either on a day-to-day repairing lease or a fully repaired and insuring lease. That's it.
Yeah.
So we've had an example. We did a four-bed shared house up in the northeast, and we've literally in 12 months had one phone call from the housing association. Yeah. We've not seen a utility bill because we're not responsible for it. We've not seen a council tax bill. So yes, there is a huge amount of work which we underestimated at the start. But really the payoff is what we ultimately wanted, which was the time, and also the income. So the income is fixed. We've got leases which are index linked. So obviously, everyone's been talking about inflation. So a lot of the leases moving forward are now capped, but we have had leases which have gone up in line with inflation. So over the last 12 months, again, there has been a positive to that perceived negative.
I think the best way that I would definitely understand and benefit from this is give us an example, maybe either your first deal or one of your favorite deals, how it came to you, how you pieced it together, and what was the result at the end. That would be sexy.
Sure. So we'll base let's do a simple 4-bed house share. So excuse me, everything's demand led. So we went to the local authority commissioner and we'd spent 6 months building a relationship.
Right.
So we understand their demand. So we've got a local authority that have got over 150 adults with learning disabilities and autism that need to be housed yesterday. So we've gone out and we've gone back to our old network, our old property network, and we've started to look at what we think are suitable properties. At the same time, we've started to reach out to care providers. So this is the element that is purely people focused. They will typically be regulated by CQC, the Quality Care Commission. The money, if you follow the money, comes ultimately from the Department of Work and Pensions, central government, into local authority housing benefit.
Got it. Right.
Now, the local authority commissioner has got relationships with all the hospitals and other people in the area that need housing. That commissioner needs to support that property. So at this property that we found, the commissioner and the care company walked around with us, inspected out. We've made some adaptations, and therefore we know in principle it's fit for purpose.
Right. And that's when you put the offer in. That's when you secure it.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Now, the next plate to spin is your housing association.
Okay. Why do we need them? Why do we need them?
That's our letting agent. That's our hands-off element, right? There's a couple of reasons we want a housing association, Caroline. One is you have to have a housing association, a regulated provider, to claim the exempt rent. So we are not capped LHA rate. But again, the reason we have a separate housing association, a separate care partner, is to make sure that our tenants are looked after. And that, by the way, the tenants are funded. Their care package is completely separate. We are not involved in that.
Got it.
Our housing association partner will have a service level agreement with the care partner. That's between them.
Yep.
Our housing association is ultimately our tenant. So we have to complete the property to their standards, and they, in return, will give us a lease.
Okay.
Typically around about 10 years.
The funding behind this, how do you structure that from purchase to refinance or to liquidation?
Sure, a great question. So we fund it front end again, through private investors, bridging, development finance, all the traditional routes that we have done for 10 years. Now, the interesting component of this is it goes back to what we were talking about the strength of the covenant, the strength of the lease that you're getting. So we have a panel of lenders that understand that there is an institutional exit. So there is a market in principle for these types of properties. But we don't want to sell everything because we want to rebuild our income. So we have a limited number of lenders as the whole. This is one of the big challenges. We've got lenders, but more importantly, we have valuers that will give us a compressed yield valuation.
Okay.
We'll take the core rent and we'll get a multiplier on that.
Right.
Now, for a HMO, you take off what, 20, 25%?
Yeah.
Nothing gets retracted because it's guaranteed rent. We're not overly worried about the increasing interest rates. We're always going to pay a bit more because it's commercial lending.
Yeah.
But so that's enabled us to refinance out the original money and hold. And remember, we've got no other bills apart from the cost of that lending and buildings insurance. Everything else is taken away from us because of the profile of the individuals we're looking after and because of the housing association that we have in the middle.
Okay, so let's go back to that example of that 4-bed house that you were referring to and how it was the local authority commissioner, then it was your care providers, then it's your housing association. You got that all tied up. It's going to be a 4-bed. So that's for 4 people who need assisted care, but the people who are providing that care don't actually live in the property.
They'll have a staff room, but they are essentially waking care. So they'll just be on a rota.
I think that is absolutely my light bulb moment, because I kept thinking, hang on a minute, how do you know how many rooms you need for staff to sleep in if it's because assisted living to me is someone there all the time. But of course, I'm assuming that they're living there. Okay, so the waking.
This is where there's a lot of the terminology. And again, people slightly have a different definition of assisted living, supported living, specialized supported living, which is technically what we're doing with all the different components. But again, if we're looking at a more complex, and you were right to say that there's different, criteria of the individuals that we look after. I mean, we've had a call this morning with a care partner that wants us to look at individual bungalows, 2-on-1 care, all anti-ligature, a very robust design. Wow. So that's obviously going to be a completely different project to a 4-bed house share in, Wigan, for example.
So how do you then do your calculation? Because the analysis on the deals will be completely different. We're used to our, 20% discount, for how are you running the numbers? You talked about yields and compressed yields. Yeah. Is it different yields for different areas or different types of care or different size of property? Yeah. Talk us how you work out the yield elements and value.
Yeah, it's another moving goalpost, but in essence, the reason I spoke about the investment funds is sometimes an exit is to sell to some of the investment funds because they're buying secure index-linked income, right? Which is the goal for any pension fund manager out there. So there is a huge market. It has been done very well. It's also been done not so well with different parties, but they will pay a yield, which moves with the market. Up until November, it was pretty stable. Then obviously we had the mini meltdown in November, and then the markets responded and the yields have moved up. But we know that we've got a yield exit of, let's say, X, right? Now, there's also some fees that as the developer we have to contribute to. But again, we've got a pretty much, when we're going into a deal, we understand what the value is on a yield base, on a yield exit. So we do our calculations and we work backwards. We're not looking for the 20% discount upfront because the value add is the strength of the support from the local authority, the exempt rent, and the caveat is we are very pragmatic and we involve every stakeholder in the setting of that rent to make sure that it is sustainable. Again, the sector's had its problems with rents being very, very high. Yeah. Some housing associations have financially struggled to service those rents. So we're very mindful of the rent because that's a very sensitive topic in the sector. But again, we've got our core rent, we've got a number of users, we've got a yield exit. That's how we calculate our GDV.
if you were to rent out that 4-bed house or as a private rental, monthly basis, what would you get for that?
So let's say 4 rooms or 3 rooms at £105 a week.
Okay. So what would be the comparison doing this model here?
£125 a week.
Okay. So if you do that,
I've deliberately chosen an area which is actually quite close.
Yeah.
Because sometimes even the shared will be about 50, 60, £70 higher than the market rent.
Wow.
But the key difference is that's it. We have no council tax. I go for no's now. No council tax, no utilities, no letting agent. Door falls off. Not my problem.
Yeah. That is that. So you're nudging the income up, and I say nudging, but it's actually significant. £20 per room per week. That's insane, right? And then you've lost your 10% letting agent. You've lost your moat apart from the insurance, but annual gas safety checks and all that jazz. That's theirs as well.
But initially we hand it over fully compliant,
right?
And the housing association will take care of those checks moving forward.
What has been your greatest challenges with going in, apart from learning it all, but the greatest challenges like with going into this?
It's again. So initially, again, we were in the eye of that storm where every property was sold the day it was listed.
Yeah.
And the challenge was the workload that the local authorities have, social workers, etc., is just immense. You don't understand until you get some exposure to it how underpaid, understaffed these departments are. So the challenge was actually securing good properties, because by the time we presented a property that we thought met their criteria and it had gone round the necessary individuals, it was off the market.
Oh man.
So we spent a lot of time chasing shadows. Outside of that, the biggest is just having your plate simultaneously spinning. So as I said, you've got your local authority, care partner, housing association, potential exit lined up before you buy.
Yeah.
And then you've got all your property challenges. So your normal property challenges plus 4/5 other stakeholders that you need to manage.
If there's anyone listening and getting very, very excited, what would be your advice for them to get going on this? There's maybe a long list.
No, there's a few. I think, why are you doing it? And I would say find a tenant cohort that you can resonate with, or find a group of people that maybe you want to start understanding and helping. Mental health's always in the news, for obvious reasons. We've got some care partners that deal exclusively with mental health, which is amazingly rewarding. Domestic violence victims is another one. So my recommendation is go and find a care partner charity that works in an area where you've got a genuine reason to be there.
Okay.
And then it's just relationships. You need to build those relationships at a local authority level, at your care partner level, and also importantly with the housing associations.
I've got a resi broker, I've got a commercial broker. Are you now using a completely separate broker for this type of lending, or are you going to your commercial guy?
Typically commercial. I'm very fortunate that I've found a broker through another developer that understands this market fully.
Great.
And he gives us access to the small, but there are lenders out there that will lend on this product.
It's incredible. So you've given us an example of a little 4-bed, which I think is, for most of our listeners, will be manageable for them to get their heads around starting at that level. How big can this go? Can we build for this?
So when you're building, have your exit lined up, fully understand the assistive technology that you need to be putting in. I never realized how important temperature control is for a lot of these individuals. So again, you need to get the spec of the local authority. Some of them have minimum space standards. So Kent, for example, is 45 square meters for a 1-bed. You've then got your care partner specification, and then you've got your housing association spec. Now, your housing association is your client. You need to get them to give you PC, practical completion sign-off, but you need to incorporate the other specs as well as the national standards.
Sounds delightful.
Yeah, walk in the park.
Ben, how are you still sane?
Some would say I'm not, but yeah, again, it's the sequencing, Caroline's really important. But again, for us, we know the demand's not going away in our lifetime. We know there's a market for it. We know there's a great social impact made. And actually, once you have set it up, the benefits are 10 years of relatively hands-on, cool and tenant-free, so which is nice.
Well, I know that our listeners will be absolutely blown away by some of this content. So thanks for sharing that. And we might get you back on again if our listeners demand to maybe talk through one of your projects from start to finish so that they can hear the intricacies of what goes into that. But it was brilliant catching up with you, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks, Caroline.